I'll tell you three things, and the last will change everything. The first is simple: I had never seen anyone like her before. The second, I wasn't prepared for what she would reveal. And the third, well, you'll understand soon enough. It began on a quiet morning aboard the research vessel Elysium, drifting in the endless grey expanse of space near the outer reaches of the Oort cloud. My name is Robert Stanton, and I have spent the better part of my life staring at stars, calculating trajectories, and measuring distances that no human has ever touched. I was 63 then, perhaps a little too old for the rigors of deep space missions, but experience carries a weight that youth cannot measure. We were on a routine survey mission, charting cometary fragments and recording radiation readings when the anomaly appeared, a single object drifting silently against the backdrop of black nothingness. At first glance, it resembled a small escape pod, but the markings were unlike anything we had catalogued. Its surface shimmered subtly, reflecting the dim light of our distant sun in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The team debated whether to approach it. Protocol dictated caution, but curiosity has always been stronger than protocol in my kind of work. I remember volunteering first. There was a strange calm in the air, a hush that settled over the vessel as we drew near. The pod opened without a sound. And then I saw her. She was seated, motionless, her body encased in a sleek suit of unknown material, its color a soft, pearlescent silver that shifted with the light. Her helmet obscured her face, but there was a sense of presence, of quiet intelligence, in the way she held herself. For a moment, I doubted reality. Perhaps we had drifted into some optical mirage, a trick of the senses, but the slow, deliberate movement of her fingers confirmed she was real. I approached her carefully. She did not resist as I unlatched her helmet, though my colleagues watched with a mixture of awe and anxiety. And then, when the helmet was fully removed, I realized what none of us could have anticipated: her eyes were not like ours. They were large and luminous, reflecting the void of space itself, deep pools of shifting colors that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. She did not speak at first. There was a pause, a moment of suspended time where the weight of the universe pressed into the cabin. I felt every second stretch, each heartbeat a reminder that we had crossed some invisible boundary between the known and the unknowable. Finally, she spoke, but not in words I understood. The sound was musical, almost like the vibration of distant stars, yet somehow the meaning penetrated directly into my mind. Do not fear. I am not what you think. I am not from your world. That statement, though calm and measured, sent a shiver through my bones. I had studied countless theories of extraterrestrial life, from microbial spores to intelligent civilizations light years away, but nothing could have prepared me for the quiet certainty in her voice. Over the following hours, I learned a few things about her, not her name, not yet, but fragments of her origin. She came from a place where life did not rely on air, water, or the kind of matter we consider essential. Her people existed in multiple states simultaneously, traveling through dimensions we barely comprehend. Time, she explained, was not linear where she came from. Past, present, and future were threads that could be touched, rearranged, even observed like patterns in water. I remember asking her if she had been alone in the pod. She replied with a tilt of her head, as though amused by my assumption. Alone, she said, is a relative concept. The rest of the crew was understandably unsettled. Some suggested we confine her, others wanted to contact Earth immediately, though I knew that such transmissions would be meaningless. How could we explain this? The words would falter before the reality, and perhaps some truths are too immense for the human tongue. As night fell over the Oort cloud, the vessel hummed quietly, and I found myself sitting beside her, asking questions in the hopes of understanding. She answered patiently, with a clarity that made me feel simultaneously small and enlightened. There was no arrogance in her demeanor, only an awareness of the vastness of existence that I had spent a lifetime chasing. I realized, in that quiet, that my life would never be the same. The stars, once distant and untouchable, now felt like the faint whispers of something much larger, something that had finally reached out and touched me. And yet, there was one thing I had to know before the moment could settle into memory. I leaned forward and asked the question that had taken root in my mind the instant I saw her. Why are you here? She looked at me with those endless eyes, and for the first time, I sensed something that resembled human emotion, an echo of longing, curiosity, and, strangely, hope. And then she said something that would mark the beginning of a journey none of us could have imagined. "I am here," she whispered, "because you must remember." And in that single line, the calm of the universe shifted, as though a door had opened somewhere between the stars, and we had stepped across its threshold without knowing it. The first few days aboard Elysium after her awakening were unlike anything I, or any of the crew, had experienced. The pod's hum, the faint vibration of the engines, even the routine beeping of instruments seemed muted, as if the presence of someone, or something, beyond our comprehension had dampened the ordinary rhythms of life. She moved with deliberate grace, never rushing, yet always appearing exactly where she needed to be. She would study the instruments with gentle curiosity, touch surfaces lightly, and sometimes, without warning, she would pause and stare into the endless void outside our viewport. Those moments were not simple contemplation, they were acts of dialogue, silent conversations with a universe that we could barely perceive. I spent more hours with her than anyone else. My colleagues feared I was becoming too close, too dependent on her explanations, too willing to accept impossibilities as truths. Perhaps they were right. But there was something in her presence that called to the deepest parts of me, in memories, long buried, that I had not realized existed. I remembered my father teaching me the names of stars on the cracked wooden deck of our house in New Mexico. I remembered the evenings spent watching the slow arc of the moon with my mother, listening to her stories about old gods and celestial travelers. And somehow, sitting beside her, I felt those moments returning, illuminated in a way that made them more vivid than memory alone could achieve. It was on the 5th day that she finally began to explain. Not in words, but in thought, images appearing in my mind like reflections in water. I saw her world, not as a place, but as a state of being. Color and light moved independently of space, forming shapes and patterns that conveyed thought and emotion. Time was layered, moments did not follow each other but existed side by side, visible and malleable. It was dizzying and beautiful, and I realized, with a strange mixture of awe and terror, that the universe I had studied all my life was only a fraction of what truly existed. "Why have you come here?" I asked, when my mind could finally form words again. Her eyes, vast and shimmering, regarded me without judgment. And in that gaze, I understood something profound. Her presence here was not random, nor was it accidental. She was a mirror, a messenger, a reminder of what humanity had forgotten. "Your world has drifted," she said, not aloud, but inside my thoughts. "You have forgotten the threads that connect you to the greater design. You chase knowledge as if it were separate from life, as if the stars were distant curiosities instead of companions. I am here to show you the paths you have lost." I shivered, feeling the truth of her words. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps all my calculations, charts, and missions had been exercises in self-deception, efforts to map the universe while failing to recognize my place within it. Yet there was another layer, a subtle tension that underlay every interaction. She was foreign, undeniably so, but not hostile. Still, there was a distance I could not bridge, a sense of otherness that reminded me of my own limitations. I wanted to understand her fully, to know the reality of her existence, but I feared that some truths were too vast, too alien, to be fully grasped. One evening, while the vessel drifted through a silent nebula of icy fragments, she touched my mind again, more insistently this time. I saw visions of Earth, not as it was, but as it could have been. Civilizations that might have flourished in harmony with the cosmos, cities built in resonance with planetary rhythms, humans who understood the music of the spheres. And alongside those visions, I saw what we had become, fragmented, distracted, distant from the deep currents of life that had always surrounded us. "You cannot return entirely unchanged," she said. "You may try, but what you have glimpsed will remain inside you." Her words, though gentle, carried weight beyond my comprehension. Change was inevitable. The question was whether I would resist it or embrace it. In the days that followed, we began to communicate more directly. Not through language, but through shared perception. She showed me how to feel the subtle vibrations of energy in space, how to sense the interplay of time and matter. I learned to recognize patterns in the seemingly random drift of asteroids, to perceive the faint echoes of distant civilizations long gone. And yet, each revelation brought more questions than answers, leaving me both exhilarated and exhausted. It was on the 10th day that a deeper revelation occurred. While observing a small moon fragment, she touched my hand lightly, and I felt a connection unlike anything I had experienced with another human being. It was as if our minds were briefly synchronized, sharing not just thought, but memory, emotion, and intuition. In that instant, I glimpsed her world again, and realized that her people did not simply observe existence, they participated in it, shaping it in subtle, imperceptible ways. They were both outside and within reality, guardians and witnesses, travelers and constants. I withdrew my hand quickly, overwhelmed by the enormity of what I had felt. She looked at me, calm, patient, almost mournful. "You see only fragments," she said. "Human minds cannot hold all that is at once. But even fragments are enough, if you listen carefully." And listen I did. For the first time in my life, I began to understand that exploration was not merely about measuring or observing. It was about experiencing, connecting, remembering. The universe was not an object to be mapped, but a living, breathing symphony in which we were participants, whether we knew it or not. As I lay in my bunk that night, staring at the dim lights of distant stars, I felt both smaller and larger than I had ever felt. Smaller, because I understood how little I truly knew. Larger, because I sensed the threads that linked me to everything around me. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the vessel, I realized that my life, and perhaps the lives of all humanity, would never be the same, for she had come not to conquer, nor to teach in simple terms, but to remind us of something we had forgotten, that we were never truly separate from the universe, and that sometimes, the most profound discoveries require not instruments or equations, but attention, patience, and the courage to see what lies beyond the familiar. And in that realization, I understood the gravity of what was yet to come. Time had begun to bend in ways I could barely describe. Days and nights aboard the Elysium became fluid, measured not in hours or rotations, but in pulses of understanding, moments when the universe seemed to exhale, revealing glimpses of its hidden layers. I no longer relied solely on instruments. I was learning to read patterns in the subtle vibrations of space, to feel the shifts of energy that humans had once called chaos, but were, in truth, rhythms I had never noticed. She, though I still did not know her name, guided me with a quiet insistence, yet she revealed little about herself. Her origin, her people, the deeper truths she hinted at, all remained just beyond reach, like stars too distant to touch but luminous enough to shape the night sky. And yet, I sensed urgency in her calm demeanor, a sense that something was approaching that even she could not fully control. It began with the signals. At first, they were faint, almost imperceptible distortions in the space-time continuum, like tiny ripples on a pond. I noticed them only because she had trained me to sense what I had never noticed before. Then the ripples grew into waves, subtle at first, then undeniable. Objects in our path seemed to shift slightly, as if the very fabric of the universe were stretching, bending around an invisible force. We were not alone. The realization came slowly, creeping into my consciousness like a shadow at the edge of light. Whatever she was, whatever her people represented, there were others who observed, and perhaps pursued, the same phenomena. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had encountered cosmic anomalies before, but nothing with the sense of awareness I now perceived. Someone, or something, was tracking us, moving along patterns we could not yet discern. One night, as I watched the void through the observation dome, she came to stand beside me. Her presence was quiet but immense, as if the space around her recognized her as a participant in some ancient, ongoing dialogue. She did not speak, and I did not ask. Instead, we both watched the subtle glow of distant particles, drifting in patterns that suggested intention, purpose. "You feel them," she said at last, not with words, but with a thought that resonated directly in my mind. "They are aware of your presence. And they are coming." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing on me. "Who are they?" I asked, though I feared the answer. "They are remnants," she replied. "Echoes of what once was. Guardians, watchers, perhaps predators. I do not know their motives fully. They are not like my people. They exist in the margins, in the spaces between worlds, feeding on what they cannot create." Her explanation left me both fascinated and unnerved. The universe I had believed to be vast and empty was, in reality, alive with forces beyond comprehension. Some were benevolent, like her, moving through dimensions with purpose. Others were indifferent, or worse, actively seeking to manipulate or consume. And in that realization, I understood the fragility of our existence, not just on Earth, but wherever consciousness could perceive the cosmos. The tension aboard the vessel became palpable. The crew, unaware of the subtleties I had begun to perceive, noticed only the changes in me. I spent hours meditating on the patterns she showed me, tracing invisible currents, sensing anomalies in matter and energy. Some nights I would awaken to find her sitting across the room, eyes luminous, silently observing me, and I knew that even without words, she was teaching me to perceive what my human senses could not. Then came the day, or perhaps night, when the ripples converged. A fragment of the void shifted violently, and the ship trembled as though the universe itself had pressed its finger against our hull. Warning lights flashed, instruments screamed in their mechanical voices, and yet she remained calm, a serene island amidst the chaos. "They are here," she said. "And they are watching. You must decide what you will do next, Robert. Your choices will ripple far beyond this vessel, far beyond your understanding of time and consequence." I felt a knot in my chest, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Everything I had ever known, every principle of physics and human understanding, now seemed provisional, mutable, like notes in a symphony I had only just begun to hear. And yet, within that uncertainty, I found a strange clarity. We could not simply react. We had to understand, to perceive, to remember what had been forgotten. Over the following hours, she led me through exercises that defied logic. I learned to extend my perception beyond the immediate, to sense the echoes of objects before they appeared, to feel the currents of space bending in response to unseen forces. Each lesson drained me physically but expanded my awareness in ways that left me both humbled and terrified. And then, at last, she revealed something personal, not her name, but a fragment of her own vulnerability. "Even I," she said, "cannot fully navigate what is coming. My existence is vast, yet I am not omniscient. I have crossed worlds and dimensions, and still, some things elude me. That is why I need you. That is why you must remember." It was a statement that lingered, heavier than any star or planet. I realized that our fates were intertwined, not by chance, but by design, though whose design, I could not yet say. In the quiet moments that followed, I understood that what lay ahead would not be measured in hours or days, but in the choices we made, in our willingness to perceive and act beyond the limitations of our species. And somewhere, deep in the silent currents of space, I sensed the others, the watchers, the predators, the echoes, gathering. They were patient, eternal, and I knew that the moment of confrontation, or revelation, was approaching. She touched my hand lightly once more, and in that instant, I felt the weight of possibility pressing into my chest. "Do not fear what is coming," she said. "Fear only that which you do not perceive. Open your mind, and you may survive, and remember." I nodded, though I was not sure I fully understood. But one thing was certain: everything was changing. The universe I thought I knew, the life I had measured and mapped, the stars I had revered, all were now threads in a tapestry I had only begun to glimpse. And I understood, with a growing certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that nothing would ever be the same again. The universe had begun to speak in ways I could no longer ignore. Every vibration in space, every subtle shift of matter and light, carried meaning. The watchers, or predators, as she had called them, were no longer distant echoes. They moved with purpose, threading themselves into the pattern she had taught me to perceive. And yet, despite their presence, there was a strange elegance to the way events unfolded, a symmetry that suggested intelligence far beyond our reckoning. I had spent what felt like weeks, or perhaps months, immersed in lessons of perception and memory. Time had lost its rigid definition, moments stretched and overlapped like threads in a tapestry. And through it all, she remained beside me, a steady current of awareness, guiding me without demanding, teaching without imposing. It was on the night, or whatever approximation of night the vessel allowed, when the confrontation became unavoidable. The anomaly we had detected in Chapter 2 had intensified into a complex structure of energy, light, and matter. It moved with a consciousness that was unmistakable, folding the space around it into impossible shapes. Our instruments could barely track it, yet I could sense its presence in a way that felt visceral, as if it were pressing into the very marrow of my bones. "Are we in danger?" one of the crew asked, voice trembling. She did not answer them directly, but I felt her resolve echoing in my mind. "The question is not whether we are in danger," she said, "but whether we are ready to understand." I realized then that this was the moment she had been preparing me for, the moment where understanding and survival were inseparable. She extended her hand toward me, and for the first time, I sensed a complete fusion of awareness, a merging of perception that made the vast, incomprehensible patterns of the cosmos feel intimate and immediate. I understood that our minds, human and alien alike, were now connected in ways that transcended language or thought. The Watchers emerged from the folds of space. They were not corporeal, not in any sense we could grasp, rather, they were concentrations of potential, structures of energy that shifted and shimmered, their intentions hidden in layers beyond human comprehension. And yet, in that moment, I recognized a subtle truth: they were not enemies in the conventional sense. They were reminders, tests of perception, thresholds that demanded awareness. She whispered, or rather, communicated directly into the core of my consciousness: observe. Do not resist. See as I see. I did. I allowed my mind to expand, to trace the threads of possibility, to feel the currents of energy and intention. And slowly, gradually, the patterns coalesced into something comprehensible. The Watchers were guardians of memory, not of destruction. They maintained the balance of the cosmos, ensuring that civilizations did not forget the deeper threads that connected life, consciousness, and existence itself. It was then I understood her mission and ours. She was not merely an alien traveler, not a visitor from another world. She was a keeper of memory, a bridge between human perception and the greater symphony of existence. Her people existed to remind, to awaken, to ensure that intelligence did not drift into ignorance, that awareness did not fragment into isolation. And I, Robert Stanton, had been chosen not because of skill or genius, but because of experience, curiosity, and the capacity to remember what humans often forgot. I looked at her then, the alien woman who had revealed truths that spanned galaxies and dimensions. And for the first time, I understood the depth of her statement: you must remember, will we survive? I asked, voice trembling with the enormity of what I had seen. She smiled, not a human smile, but one that carried warmth, reassurance, and a hint of sorrow. Survival is not guaranteed. But understanding always endures. The Watchers observed, sensed, and eventually receded, folding back into the infinite fabric of space. The tension dissolved, leaving a profound quiet, a resonance that lingered long after the anomalies had vanished. And in that quiet, I felt the truth settle within me: the universe was vast, alive, and conscious in ways I had only begun to perceive. Our role was not to conquer or control, but to observe, remember, and participate with awareness. In the days that followed, the lessons continued, but the immediacy of danger had passed. I realized that she had been here not to save us from an external threat, but to awaken us to internal ones: forgetfulness, complacency, the illusion of separation. Humanity had measured the stars for centuries, but had rarely listened to them. She had shown me that listening was not passive, it was active, deliberate, and transformative. I came to understand, finally, that life itself was not a linear progression, nor was it confined to Earth, time, or matter as we defined it. Consciousness flowed, interconnected, shaping and being shaped by the cosmos. And somewhere deep in my being, I knew that this understanding was now part of me, a seed of awareness that could grow, spread, and, perhaps, guide others. She lingered for a time, and then, as silently as she had arrived, she departed. The pod remained, empty but still resonant with her presence. I touched it gently, feeling the faint echo of her consciousness, a reminder that the universe is never truly empty, and that some encounters are meant not for comprehension, but for transformation. I stared at the stars, older, wiser, and profoundly changed. I remembered my father, my mother, the stories of gods and travelers. And I understood at last what she had meant: we are not separate from the cosmos. We are threads in its infinite tapestry, and even the smallest thread can carry memory, meaning, and connection across time, space, and dimensions. I took a deep breath, feeling the quiet hum of the universe around me, and whispered, though perhaps only to myself, I will remember. And in that act, everything changed.